All right, we are live. Mary, you are on mute.
And now I will actually call it to order, and you can hear me. We will call the May 19th meeting of the Common Council to order. I will ask our clerk to call the roll.
Alderperson Vitale.
Here.
Weigel.
Here.
Grisham.
Here.
Haas.
Here.
Keen.
Here.
Lysick.
Here.
Reinke.
Here.
Rote.
Here.
Stefanski.
Here.
Tenorio.
Here.
10 present.
We have a quorum. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. And again, tonight we will be led by Alderman Vitale. If the rest of us on this call could mute ourselves so we're able to not walk all over each other.
I pledge the allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republics which withstands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty for all. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. We will now move on to item D on our agendas. We have two public hearings this evening. I will ask our clerk to read public hearing number 1.
Resolution to confirm and adopt the report of the city engineer containing the schedule of proposed amendments of proposed assessments for improvement of the east-west alley between South Buchanan Place, South 69th Street, Bullitt Road, Arthur Avenue, east-west alley between 65th Street to 66th Street, West Arthur Avenue to West Harrison Avenue by removal and reconstruction of the concrete alley pavement, storm sewer, utility adjustments, and storm underdraft.
Thank you. Mr. Daniels.
All right, thank you, Mayor Devine. All right, there are two alleys that we're looking at tonight. You should be seeing the first one on your screen. They're both very small alleys. This one is, like Rebecca said, between 69th and Buchanan. There's actually only 3 properties on this alley. This alley was originally built in 1930. It's 20 feet wide, so it's 90 years old. It was resurfaced in 1971. So that asphalt on top of the concrete is 49 years old. Then the next alley, which should appear. This alley is on the border with Milwaukee. So there are 5 properties in West Dallas. This alley was built in 1954, so it's 66 years old. Milwaukee, we talked about doing this alley with Milwaukee back in 2015, and then they kind of backed out. So Milwaukee is gung-ho again to do it again. So most of the alley is south of that diagram there in the city of Milwaukee. So there's probably several dozen people in Milwaukee, and then there are 5 people in West Dallas. So we would split the cost, equitably. And Milwaukee would take the lead on that. They would design it and build it since most of it is in Milwaukee. Here's some pictures. This is back to the first alley in West Dallas. This is the one that's 90 years old. It's in horrible condition. It's just, as I like to say, alligator cracking everywhere and potholes everywhere. It's very difficult for our public works guys to fill in all the potholes every year. And then this is the other alley that's partly in Milwaukee. This is the portion that's actually in West Dallas. It's in atrocious condition. It's been patched so many times, and Public Works has been very heroic in trying to put that big patch down there on the right, but this alley needs to be reconstructed at this point. This is what the final product will look like, a brand new concrete alley with a nice V for the drainage in the middle, new catch basins. Here's the cost of the project. This is both alleys together, $34,000 for the pavement, $7,000 to put in some new storm sewer. So it's a total of $41,000. We have different rates. You kind of get what you pay for in West Dallas. So for the 18-foot alley that is in West Dallas, that's the one that's with Milwaukee, $36 a foot. And then the 20-foot alley that's in West Dallas, that's $38 a foot. You pay for what you get, like I said. Would be much higher rates for commercial properties. I don't believe there actually are any on either of these alleys. And here's how the costs are, where the funding is coming from. So special assessments are going to pay for 32%. The stormwater utility fund would pay for 17%. And then the general taxes would pay for the other half, 51%. Here is a typical special assessment. I think a lot of the lots are about 50 feet wide. At $36 per foot, that comes to $1,806. It's important to point out that the bills would not go out until March of 2021. I think both these alleys are going to be done in the fall. Milwaukee said they would do theirs in the fall. And I think we would probably do the one that we're doing in the fall as well. So we would not be mailing out any bills before tax time. So these bills would go out next spring in 2021. And at that point, you would have three options. You could pay a lump sum without interest, or you could go on a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. If you did choose the 10-year plan, your first payment would be in 2021. It would be $253 for the whole year. If you were on an escrow like I am, it'd be $21 a month on your monthly mortgage escrow. And then the 10th year, that would drop to $188 for the whole year, or $16 a month if you were paying on an escrow. So why do we special assess? This is the next slide. We've been doing it for 110 years. In the past, historically, property owners actually paid the whole cost of their alley or their street. Now, as we see on this project, the property owners are paying about 32% of the actual cost. The assessment rate is the same for all residential properties. I know there are different rates based on the width, but for when you're comparing apples to apples, 18-foot alley to 18-foot alley, everyone in the city is paying the same rate, the $36 or the $38. Wisconsin has a long history of special assessments for over 110 years. We've had this state law that allows for this. And over that time, of course, there have been a lot of people that have challenged that. There have been hundreds of court cases. I have a book full of court cases. But the Wisconsin courts have always upheld this law as a fair and equitable way and reasonable way of recouping the costs for a project. Another reason we special assess is it's the only way to ensure that tax exempt schools, churches, charities, hospitals, county parks, utilities, railroads pay their fair share too. No one is exempt from special assessments, even though there are 430 properties in the city that don't pay any property taxes. And many of these tax exempt schools, churches, hospitals, and county parks are very large properties. They actually encompass 28% of the total parcel area in the city is not paying taxes. So they only contribute to the city's costs through these special assessments. And as I said earlier, if there were a business or even a manufacturing company on these alleys, they would pay much higher rates of $45 to $57 per foot because they have more traffic. So this next slide reinforces what I just said. These are all the tax exempt parcels in the city. The 28% of the city is shaded in with different colors here. Those are the properties that are not paying taxes, but they do pay for special assessments. So that's one reason why we do it. This map is showing all the parcels in the last, I think it's 15 years now, that have paid special assessments. All the different colors are different years, but you can see on the east end of town, most parcels have at least paid once and probably paid a couple of times for their street and their alley. So everyone is paying, that's the point of this, is everyone is paying their fair share. Most have already paid for their alley or street. So it's not like we're singling out anybody. A lot of people ask, why do I have to pay 4% interest? Well, the city is borrowing the funds for this project. So the city is paying interest to these municipal bondholders over the next 10 years. So the city is merely passing along these interest charges to the residents that choose the 5 or 10-year plan. The city's not making a profit off of that interest. There is at least one case I know of where someone may need to have a disabled parking spot. That's something we do all the time. If people just let us know, we can set up one of these temporary disabled parking spots out in front of their house or wherever it would be convenient. If they have one of these stickers or have license plates like that, we can certainly do that. There will be a time where the residents will have to park on the street because the fresh concrete will have to be cured for maybe 3 to 5 days. So they will have to be out of their garage, unless I guess if they're not going to work and they don't need to get their car, but otherwise they would have to park out on the street, and we can accommodate any disabled people that need a special spot. And then I just want to reiterate at the end that if you want updates on this, we do have an email that goes out weekly. You can sign up for that on our website. It's halfway down the list there. It says construction and progress report. That'll get you all the info sent right to your email address at least once a week, sometimes even more, on all of our projects. And you can check out what's happening on your project or other projects at any time. So with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. We will now open it up to questions from the council, and then check if there were any questions from the audience. Alderman Vitale?
Yes, Mr. Daniel. First of all, I'm delighted to see if finally, after 10 years, the West Dallas, or the residents on the West Dallas side for the alley between 65th and 67, they were in favor to have that redone a long time ago. But Milwaukee, of course, they kind of hold us back for many years. So I'm really thrilled now that finally we came to a conclusion to rebuild that alley. Good job, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Vitale. Oh, go ahead, Pete.
I did confirm with the city of Milwaukee yesterday. I didn't want them to back out again. So they said, oh yeah, they're gung-ho, they're gonna do it. So we shouldn't have any problems this time.
Very good. Thanks, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you. Any other questions from the Common Council? Okay, seeing none, I'll check in to see if any email questions came in.
There are no email questions.
Okay, with no questions from the visual audience, I will close public hearing number 1, and I will ask the clerk to read public hearing number 2.
Resolution relative to determination of application for a special use permit for Brainiacs Academy 2 LLC, a proposed education facility to be located at 5806 West National Avenue.
Thank you. Mr. Scher?
Thank you, Mayor. So our next public hearing is for Brainiacs Daycare Academy at 5806 West National Avenue. It's on the north side of the street, across the street from the public table and kegels. The reason why we have a public hearing for this item tonight is that daycares are considered special uses within the city's community commercial C3 zoning district. This building is a mixed-use building. The first floor is where the daycare will be located, about a total of 1,400 square feet. This is a former Light of Grace church location. The church is no longer there, and they're going to be leasing the space to Brainiacs Daycare for up to about 31 children, from infant to preteen. The hours are from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Friday. And then there are 27 parking stalls that will be provided on the site, and the daycare requires only 4 of those parking spaces. So the daycare is proposing some improvements to convert the space from former church space to a daycare. And the interior changes are going to include obviously retrofitting the interior with various rooms, offices, break rooms, and then the overall childcare area. There is an infant room in the northeast corner or northwest corner of the building. And then there's also going to be some ramped areas to overcome some grade differences between surrounding parking lot surfaces, and the ingress egress points, both to the main entrance of the building on the west side or left side of that floor plan that you see there, as well as a direct access out of the building for the infant playroom, infant area. In terms of site improvements, the proposed site improvements include existing landscaping areas. The existing parking areas are going to remain the same, but aside from those ramped areas, the daycare is going to be utilizing a play area, about a 2,500 square foot play area just to the west, on the west side of the site. And then access to that can be accomplished either through the parking lot or along public sidewalk, and then into the play area. So Plan Commission has recommended that the walkway area be identified from the building, from the daycare building to the play area, as well as an updated play lot fence being installed around the play area. This is a street view of the site, with the daycare location being on the right, and then the play area being behind the gray building on your left. And so Plan Commission has recommended approval on April 23rd. There have been no objections to date, and that concludes my public hearing. If there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain those now.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Chair. Are there any questions from the members of the Common Council?
Mayor Devine, this is Haas.
Yeah, go ahead, Alderman Haas.
Yeah, Steve, so this was a church. It's now going to become a daycare. Is it going to be going from nonprofit to for-profit and therefore taxable, or what can you tell us about that?
I may have to get back to you on that. So right now, the daycare, in my understanding, the daycare is a for-profit. The existing ownership of the site, though, is nonprofit, so it's currently non-taxable. I believe, and I guess I could touch base with the city assessor shortly here, but I believe the portion of the building that is for-profit can be or may be taxed, but I would look to our city assessor to confirm that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other questions from the Common Council? Okay, any emails come in from the public?
There are no emails from the public.
Okay, thank you. Then we will close public hearing number 2. And we will go to page 2 of our agendas, and item E will be our standing committees. They will be meeting during recess. The room numbers are not listed because they will be done virtually. Item F is the mayor's report. I don't have a mayor's report this evening. Moving to item G, are there any reports from the alderpersons?
Mayor Devine,
Alderman Lysick,
I move for approval of the minutes of the Common Council meeting of May 5th, 2020, and the special meeting of May 12th, 2020.
Second.
there's a motion with a second by Alderman Vitale. Were there any changes or adjustments to the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are carried. Moving on to item I. Items not referred to committee, I'll ask for a motion to place item 4 on file and refer items 5 and 6 to the city attorney.
So move, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Weigel.
Got a motion by Alderman Vitale and an almost muted second by Alderperson Grisham. And we will give the second to Alderman Weigel because I heard him. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I like and noted somebody muted me once again.
Any opposed? Okay, the item's carried. We have
Mayor
no
Devine,
committee reports under J. Alderman Lysick.
I move that we stand in recess until conclusion of the committee meetings.
Second, Grisham.
There's a motion and a second by Alderperson Grisham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are in recess.
All right, and then our first item of business on our agenda is a joint referral for both the Administration and Finance and Public Works Committees. So we have everyone here already. So hey, this works out well. It's a communication regarding the 2020 Capital Improvement Program and borrowing.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Grill, go ahead.
Okay. I'll try to cover this, and I think the finance director, Peggy Stino, probably will jump in. There are two attachments to this file. One was the capital improvement program that was approved as part of the budget, and then there were some adjustments that were on that more colorful sheet. We're bringing it to you, before you today, based on the fact of the budget challenges we are having, and the fact that a majority of the items in the program were going to be borrowed for, including items that the city has not borrowed for in the past. This came to mind last week when the Public Works Department was asking regarding funding for planting in boulevards. And that was one of the items that was listed for us to borrow. Our capacity for borrowing, I don't know, Peggy, I know you sent me some information last week, but maybe you could summarize the limitations we're going to have regarding our debt payment because of the increasing in borrowing that's been much greater than past years.
Yeah, let me look that up.
Sorry. I think I can get it too.
So typically our borrowing is about 2.75 million. As everyone knows, we increased our street borrowing this year from 2.75 to 3.75. We do have additional capital items, as Rebecca noted. It's actually page 2 in the budget that shows all of those additional borrowing items, of which the street lighting is 1.6 million. There's about 500,000 of capital equipment from the Public Works facility, and then another 500,000 of miscellaneous things. We did think we were going to have more money left over in 2019 than is actually turning out. We will have those numbers finalized in the next 10 days or so we can let you know that. But as of right now, our borrowing is going to be $6.4 million compared to the 2.75 that we usually borrow, which means our payment that would usually be about $325,000 is now going to be about $750,000. So that means that's going to increase taxes, obviously, for those payments over the course of 10 to 20 years, depending on the nature of the purchase. The borrowing is not necessarily an expenditure restraint limit, because borrowing under state regs is free, you might say, although we all know that it costs our taxpayers a lot of money to be able to fund that borrowing. So basically, we're looking at 2+ times our normal borrowing, our normal debt payment on an annual basis that we'd be locking into for 10 years should we borrow all of these funds.
Thank you. I pulled up on the screen the page that Peggy was referencing. So I think the third row has a lot of different items that maybe the council might want to relook at regarding that borrowing. Certainly, we can continue to go ahead with that. I think we're just looking for some guidance on if we should be moving forward with these things, or should we bring them to you individually as they come up?
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Lysick.
Rebecca, why is this coming to us now? Shouldn't this have been a subject at budget time if we thought that this was going to be a problem now? I know there were some of us that didn't like the idea of borrowing for capital equipment and you know, we were told there wasn't really a choice. We can't do it because of the expenditure restraints, but now we're being told that we can't do it because it's going to increase taxes too much. I guess I'm a little bit surprised that the number, I would think that the council should have been made aware of this during the budget process and not now. I mean, you say some of the funds were not carried over that we thought were going to be, or we didn't have as much to carry over. What is that difference? How much did that amount to?
So I believe we were expecting that we would have almost $600,000 to carry over. And we're not going to be anywhere close to that. I think Peggy, you said that you'll have
Yeah,
that in the
I was going
next
to say,
day.
let me jump in here. It's not the 573,000 that's showing on the screen. That's the problem. But let me back up a little bit. We did have this discussion at budget time. We were very clear with the Administration and Finance Committee on what the ramifications of this were. What's changed from then until now is the situation we're in with the emergency and the knowledge that we think our revenues from the state could be cut by 5 to 15% next year. And what we're trying to do is be a little bit proactive here and do some discretionary holdbacks so that we're able to make it through another budget cycle.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Lysick.
That is a different explanation than what you just gave previously, because previously you said the money wasn't there to be carried over. We're bonding for things that we weren't. And it made it look as though the budget was not done properly last year, when in fact the concern is going to be the lack of revenue from the state in this year. So that's a little different situation than what it appeared to be.
Well, let me clarify that. It's not a change in direction. It's exactly what I said. We talked about these very same concerns at the time of the budget. The 2019 budget got much tighter than we thought it would be. The 2020 budget became much tighter than we thought it would be. What we talked about at A&F back in November at budget time was, yes, we had these things listed under borrowing, but we were only going to do that if we necessarily needed them. That was our fallback plan, if you will. That wasn't our number one plan. So nothing's changed from a fiscal perspective. We had a very tighter than expected 2019 budget. We have a much tighter than expected 2020 budget, and we're not looking forward to anything a lot better going forward. So the 573, I do think is going to be available just like we planned for, because we wanted to be conservative on that. But what I'm saying is that additional borrowing that the council approved at budget time of 2.69, we were hoping that would not be 2.69. We were hoping we would have additional funds to carry over to cover some of that. Turns out we're not going to have a lot of funds to cover that. Therefore, the question becomes, at this point in time, do we want to take on that additional debt service or not? And it's certainly the council's discretion on that.
Mr. Chair, Alderman Vitale.
Go ahead, Alderman Vitale.
Yeah, I would like to, scale it down to, the council authorized change for the 220 budget. I believe, I don't think we'd be able really to exceed this kind of borrowing. I feel that's kind of dangerous, really, because say if we have another bad year next year, So at this point, I think maybe we should have some emergency meetings, I think, to discuss further where we can really cutting the budget, the cost of, instead of borrowing over $6 million. To me, it's a little bit unrealistic, really, for a city like us here, based on what really has been occurring, besides the coronavirus, but everything else. So to me, it's a little bit unrealistic for us to deep down on the taxpayers' pocket at this time. Really, to me, that's something we have to do really to kind of put everything together and try to minimize the percentage of the borrowing. To me, it's a little bit unrealistic, really. I mean, for us to pursue something like that, because we don't know next year what's going to be. What about the following year? I mean, I know in life we take a chances, but I believe there is some drastic issue here. It will affect the taxpayers' life. Really. That's why I believe we're all concerned in that respect. I mean, no doubt about that. Thank you, Alderman Haas.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Lysick.
Peggy, I understand, and I remember the discussions in December on how we suddenly found ourselves, we suddenly got some big bills in the budget last year that weren't anticipated, such in some overtime accounts, et cetera. And I know that kind of blew things out of proportion, but I guess I wasn't anticipating us having an issue. So at this point, I understand your concern, and I share that concern, and I agree with Alderman Vitale. I don't think we have any choice but to take a look at these items, and we're going to have to delay some of them until next year. We certainly can't borrow that much without affecting the taxes, and I certainly don't want to do that.
We would agree with you 100%, which is exactly why we brought this item forward.
I'm just disappointed that it had to come to this. I guess I wasn't anticipating this at all. I had thought that we were going to be in not good shape, but at least because it was in the budget, we'd be able to cover it. And I wasn't expecting that big shortfall.
Understood.
And then the other thing that none of us has a crystal ball to forecast is, well, will there be some sort of a federal government bailout coming to municipal governments related to COVID-19? I know none of us have the answer to that, and whatever it is, it's not going to be enough, I'm sure, to solve all of our problems, but it certainly would put us in a better situation.
Mr. Chair, this is Alderman Stefanski.
Go ahead, Alderman Stefanski.
Peggy, does this amount of money here also include the projected deficit that we have from the money lost in revenue from the beginning of this shutdown for businesses in the city and everything?
This does not include any of that. The item you're looking at on the screen right now, this is part of the 2020 budget. So these were decisions that were made on November 12th of 2019 for the 20 fiscal year. So it's really all of those external things that are coming together with the emergency and everything that's going on that's prompting this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I think it looks like the guidance for staff is to try and trim down our capital budget and try not to borrow as much. Is that the consensus from the council?
In my part, Alderman
I agree.
Vitale.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Alderman Weigel.
I seem to remember, I think it was, I don't know if it was around 2008, when the federal government was handing out stimulus money. It was targeted for what they were calling shovel-ready projects. And I'm wondering if we should take that into consideration when we're trimming this list. I don't know if I'm looking at the number one big ticket item on here is the streetlight conversion. And I don't know if that would be considered. I don't know whether they're going to use the same criteria or if the word shovel ready is going to even exist anywhere. But I'm just wondering if that would qualify for that. If we could maybe pare that down, that might be a spot to look right there. so that if there is some federal assistance and it is targeted for shovel ready, they would go, oh, here we go. This is shovel ready right here. And I guess I look at most of these are going to be, well, their purchases. Yeah, I guess most of them are just straight up purchases, right?
Mr. Chair.
I would just want to take that into account.
Ms. Grill, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, yeah, every day there's some new discussion regarding different funding and maybe possible reimbursements, but we're not sure exactly what's going to be coming to local governments right now. But under the bonding recommendations, there are a few things that have to do with facilities, and definitely we're trying to make some long-term decisions on facilities. So those things, unless there's something emergency, I think we would hold off on that. The poll books, I believe, due to our reduction in polling sites, we probably do not need
I
to
think those
spend.
poll books were purchased already.
Oh, were they? Okay.
So yeah, there's a number of things that were purchased. The Office 365 expansion we actually did through the operating budget. I believe the poll books were done. The parking citation process, the software, if it's not done already, it's very close to done. I think some of those maintenance items of facilities have not been done. I have not heard anything about the playground improvements. The fire station number 3 HVAC, 150,000. That was actually replaced. The fire chief came to the council at the beginning of the emergency. He needed a new compressor that was very important to his operations as well as the COVID emergency, and that was swapped out. The Boulevard, as Rebecca said, that's the discussion last week. And I think those are the ones that have been done so far.
Mr. Chair.
And Lysick.
Peggy, isn't something like that compressor reimbursable under the FEMA for being necessary for the COVID?
So we've gotten a lot of information back, been doing a lot of webinars and talking to people with FEMA and Wisconsin Emergency Management. This emergency is a little bit different than some of the other ones, whereas they're not looking at permanent infrastructure. Now, I don't want to say that it's not eligible, but I can't confirm at this point that it is. But what I will tell you is we have a number of items. We had gotten some Medicare revenue of about 35,000. We're still working through that. We have, of course, what you know as the COVID CDBG funds, 762,000, and that's kind of been, the budget has been set up. We have a BJA grant through the police department of 67,000. That's got more flexibility. That might be a good opportunity for maybe that more permanent compressor that's going to be mounted at the fire department. We also got the FEMA Category B emergency. That's a 75% reimbursement from the feds, another 12.5% reimbursement from the state, which leave 12.5% on us. What we're hearing mostly is those are for emergency services and cleaning and disinfecting. It's not for masks for City Hall. It's not for reopening of buildings. It's only for the original items that were due to the emergency nature of the COVID emergency. So as I said, we're working through some of those. The BJA grant may be the best option for that. We do know that there was just a DHS award of about 52,000, again, more on the health services, and then the possible assistance that we just heard about from Wisconsin Election Commission. So we're just not sure. What we're trying to do is be as strategic as we can with all of these funds and use the least restrictive money for the things that are not going to fall under the most restrictive money and work it backwards like that. So yes, we are hoping that compressor will happen there, but at the time we purchased it, we didn't know that, and the fire chief couldn't wait for it, which is why he suggested that we swap it out for the Fire Station 3 HVAC maintenance.
Thank you for the explanation. At least there's some hope that we may get reimbursed for some of this.
Yep, and we're working on that on a daily basis.
All right, I think our staff has some guidance here. Is there any more discussion on this issue?
Mr. Chair, Grisham here.
Yes, Alderperson Grisham.
I just want to note, as an incoming alder, And we've had a couple votes such as improvements for City Hall, reduction in liquor licenses. I'm a little disappointed that this wasn't presented to us sooner, because that really would have an impact on my vote on some of these issues, considering that this was on the table and aware of through this process. So I just wanted to make note of that I do share some disappointment here.
Any further discussion on this issue? Can I have a motion to place on file?
So move.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion from Alderman Lysick and a second from Alderman Tenorio. And this is a joint committee action, so everyone can vote. And all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Then moving on to the Administration and Finance Committee portion of the agenda, item 8 is a resolution to approve the second intergovernmental agreement with the City of Milwaukee to provide police services for the 2020 National Democratic Convention.
Move for approval, Lysick.
Second, Alderman Weigel.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Weigel.
so in assuming that the smaller scale DNC that seems likely, there'll be a smaller responsibility for our police department. I mean, I guess that's an assumption at this point, but it seems like most of these late summer events are still trending downward also, so.
If I could, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Attorney Decker, go ahead.
Thank you. So far, all the agreement does is authorize the use of West Dallas Police in this function. If it is pared back so much that Milwaukee can handle it on their own, then we just simply won't have any officers called in. So, and if it obviously the event's canceled, that wouldn't happen either. So all this does is update the dates and reflects the fact that the city did get its $50 million security grant.
Okay, any further discussion? And we have a motion and a second already, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And item 9 is a resolution granting selective waiver of interest and penalties associated with late payment of the May 31st, 2020 tax levy installment to those City of West Dallas taxpayers adversely impacted by the public health emergency.
Sure.
Attorney Decker.
Myself and the finance director discussed this one. And so at this point in time, introducing the resolution is a good way for the council to weigh in on this idea as a concept. However, legally, we would have to pass it after the county enacts its own resolution. So we would make adjustments to the resolution to mirror it and give the council a chance to vote on it at that point in time. At this point, it's a great chance, though, to discuss it so that members of the public and staff understand where the council is going with this particular topic. But I would ask that this be ultimately postponed until the June 2nd meeting after a thorough discussion.
So you want us to hold this?
At the end of it, yes, but in the interim, I think it would be very helpful if the council does want to weigh in on anything to do so now, so that taxpayers and so our staff understand where the council is leaning on this one.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Weigel.
so this would really only affect the people that chose to go on the installment plan. And it would essentially let them delay making their May 31st due installment, which would be due obviously in the next week or two, to as late as October with no penalty and no interest. I'm just curious what the fiscal impact would be for us. This would be a benefit we'd be extending to a limited number of our taxpayers, only the people who chose to go on the installment plan. And I have no idea what the percentage is. Is that half of our property taxpayers? Is it 15%? I mean, I understand the grief that everybody's in, but I guess without knowing what the fiscal impact's going to be, I mean, that would be something I'd like to know before we vote on it.
I can confirm that, yes, it would only impact those who are on the payment plan. As far as the fiscal impact, I would defer to Peggy on that one.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Peggy.
So the story with this is, yeah, the state in April, Act 185 put in place a threshold of anything that's current as of April 1st. So anybody who missed the January installment or missed the March installment, they're paying penalties and interest right now, and they will continue just as normal. So the fiscal impact is actually pretty small for how much is outstanding. There's approximately 7.1 million, as is noted in the resolution, and it's about 2,100 property owners that are currently on that plan. The amount of money that we would collect really isn't going to be any different because these are people that we assumed were going to pay, likely still will. It's just going to be a delay in paying on May 31st up to and including, the end of September. So it would be the loss of cash flow that the city has during that time. Keep in mind, we also settle with the other taxing jurisdictions right after our settlement. So 20 days after our May 31st deadline, we would go ahead and settle with the county. And then we would typically turn all of our uncollectibles over to the county in August. So we're talking not hundreds of thousands, a lot less than that, maybe 10 to 30,000, depending on how many property owners take advantage of this. The sad thing about this story, though, is county's acting at a very late moment. So the earliest that they're even going to consider this at this point is May 28th. So the people are still paying taxes right now on a regular basis, and they're going through. So I would expect the 2,100 that were current and not paid 2 weeks ago when I came out with those numbers are going to be a lot lower come the deadline. So it likely could get to the people who are either, number one, very much in need of this, or number two, very strategic in their cash flow to be able to do it. So like I said, the only difference is the delay in having our money available to us. We are not expecting a big difference in how much we collect because of this delay.
Mr.
And
Chair?
I can tell you that there's a number of citizens that are calling City Hall on a regular basis. And we're letting them know what's going on the local level, but we're also letting them know what's going on the county level because it may get to a point next week where we don't have a choice.
And Kayla, you had wanted to be recognized.
Yes, so from a practical standpoint, because the county, as Peggy said, won't be hearing about this until the 28th, there is a grace period that allows people to withhold, to not necessarily pay their taxes exactly on the date, but 5 days later. So if the council were to take this item up on the 2nd of June, after the county enacts its resolution, there would be a very narrow and brief moment in time in which the council could take action, but it's putting it right down to the wire here. And so, like I said, at this point in time, I think the discussion is very helpful for staff to know where the council's leaning. And ultimately, though, it's going to put Peggy's department sort of under the gun time-wise to make this happen on this after the 2nd.
Alderman Oz?
Go ahead, Alderman Vitale.
Yeah, I have a question. The percentage per se within our city here of property owners, many of them, they do, like I say, if they still have a loan with their property through a bank, well, every month the bank will deduct certain amount based on property taxes, of course, a percentage. So by the end of the year, the banks many times, or most of the time, they issue actually the check to the property owner to pay the property taxes. But then, of course, if it's many residents which they have the property paid for, and then they choose to make a 3 installments payment, January and March and May, what really is the percentage that will affect us really? To me, I mean, by May 31st, many people really, they've been on a plan already, throughout the years, they paid 3 installments. They still by May 31st, they will make their last payments, I mean, if they don't, well, I mean, there's always been a penalty which is connected, which is not a lot of money, but there's always a penalty connected with that, with the, with last 3 payments, there's a penalty with that. So I don't know, again, if we want to extend it to October, I mean, that's fine, but the fact that is many people, they have their home not paid for, so the money is always available, I believe, to pay the property taxes, through the bank, That's all I have.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Alderman Vitale and
Alderman
Alderman Stefanski.
Hey Peggy, with this public health emergency and this being one of the things that affects it, how long until after we get opened back up will you be able to give us a number of how bad we are financially strapped because of this?
I think we're pulling those numbers together on a regular basis. Right now, I'm actually working on a spreadsheet for the league so that they have what our revenue losses are to date. And then they asked us to make some general estimates until year end. So I think when you talk about what are we out, we're mostly out right now revenue. Most of the expenditures that have been made are going to be covered on one of those 5 grants that I told you about, and likely perhaps more coming. I think the federal government also, one of the houses has already passed another stimulus package. Don't know if the other house is going to pass it, but that's the one that includes some revenue recovery for local municipalities. So we might not know that piece of it for quite some time. But I can tell you, just as far as municipalities in the entire state go, we're really not in the bad part of that. I could tell you some horror stories about different communities. We have some, I'm going to just say minor revenues right now that we're dealing with as far as parking. When we stop parking enforcement, we stop getting parking permit revenue. We stop getting parking permit fines or parking fines. We have hotel motel reductions. Again, on a scale, ours are much smaller because we only have 2 hotels operating. We did plan this year for another hotel to open, and we know that's going to be delayed now. We are not hearing about any shared revenue cuts for 2020. We believe that's going to be perhaps hitting in 2021 and 2022, depending on how the legislature attacks the budget repair bill next year. So I think for right now, we're all keeping track of everything we're spending on the emergencies. It's just going to be a matter of once all of the grant reporting, the emergency ends, and then all the grant reporting becomes, we have to pull that all together, and then we have time to submit it to mostly the federal government under this FEMA Cap B thing. So I think on a regular basis, 60 days after the emergency ends, I know that's not a very good answer, but I think that's when everything all comes together.
Okay, thank you.
And I would suggest that granting a waiver of interest in a situation like this is the right thing to do. And as Peggy had indicated just a little bit ago, we're not talking a whole lot of money. We're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. I would think that we would want to grant the selective waiver of interest as outlined here.
Mr. Chair, could I just make one more comment on that?
Yes.
So I think Alderman Vitale, when you were talking about those people with mortgages, those
Yes.
are not, those are likely not the people we're talking about here. Most of those mortgage checks come in December. And so either on the December settlement or the January settlement, those are taken care of. These are really people mostly that likely have been in their houses longer. They perhaps don't even have a loan and they're just trying to pay their taxes. These are the people that usually go on the installment plan.
Okay.
So they might be a little bit more affected by the emergency than those people who are escrowing on a month-to-month basis and getting a check from their mortgage company at the end of the year.
Thank you, Peggy. Thanks.
Any more discussion on this item?
Mr. Chair, Tenorio.
Alderman Tenorio.
Yes, I just want to echo your sentiments. People are hurting right now and doing anything we can to support those who need it the most. So I'd support this measure as well.
Thank you, Alderman Tenorio. So I'm looking for Alderman Lysick, go ahead.
And I would agree with the chair as well. I think since we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars that we can afford to do that to help our residents that are the most needy. And it's not going to affect our cash flow that much. So I don't have a problem with it if that's the way the council chooses to go. But my understanding is we're not going to do that at this meeting, correct?
That's right. Per Attorney Decker's discussion or suggestion, I should say, we're not gonna act on this. We're gonna hold it, but we're looking for a consensus to proceed. And is it fair to say we have a consensus to proceed among the committee members? All right, I see head nods. Thanks, everybody. All right, we'll move on to item 10, resolution relative to the agreement with the Village of Hales Corners for public health services.
Move approval. Weigel.
Second, Lysick.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. And item 11 is a resolution to consider approving an action plan for fiscal year 2020 relative to the Community Development Block Grant Program.
Move for approval, Lysick.
Second, Tenorio.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And item 12 is a communication from the city assessor regarding the general effects of residential revaluations. Mr. Williams.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So a few the city of Milwaukee recently conducted a revaluation, and it resulted in many property owners getting assessment increases that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to the property owners. So it got some press, it got some attention. So we thought it'd be a good idea to, communicate to the council here and explain what happens when you do a revaluation. So in terms of why revaluations are done, they're typically done when the assessed value is not in line with market value. So if you see a period of sales trending upward, homes are selling for more and more, and the assessed value is staying constant, that's going to trigger a reval. So what you do with the reval is you canvass the city, you inspect all the properties, you collect new data, and you revalue all the property, and you realign it with the market. It goes the other way as well. When the sales are trending down and the assessed value is higher than what the market is delivering, you'd also do a reval. Going back to the Milwaukee issue, it seemed like one of the biggest contentions that people were having is that there weren't any changes to properties, yet they experienced a large increase in their value. There's also an assumption that if your assessed value goes up, your tax bill will go up. So the main crux of this presentation is just to reiterate that the tax bill is a function of the tax levy. So when you have multiple taxing jurisdictions pass their budget in the fall, the city, the county, MATC, MMSD, those levies come together to create the overall tax burden. What the assessed value does is it determines what fair share of that burden a property owner is going to bear. So with that said, if the levy is holding constant and the assessed value changes, the tax bill likely won't change much or at all. If the tax levy is going up, the tax bill is going to go up. So this week we're going to be sending out the assessment notices. And if you get questions starting next week and people start referencing what happened in Milwaukee, is that going to happen in West Dallas? Really, the change in assessed value doesn't necessarily mean that their tax bill is going to change. So that's one important part. So going forward, like I said, this Friday, the notices are going to go out in the mail. I will be sending everyone here an email that gives you a quick summary, so that when you start getting questions, you'll have something to have a speaking point from. We're also going to put in the flyer for this assessment notices a brief summary of what I've discussed tonight. To just assure everyone that just because your assessed value changes doesn't necessarily mean the tax bill is going to, change as well. And then we also have an article that's going to be coming in the upcoming newsletter.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Does anybody have any questions for Jason? Can I have a motion to place item 12 on file?
So moved, place on file, Weigel.
Second, Keen.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Item 13, discussion regarding possible early retirement incentive program for non-represented employees. And thank you, Jason, by the way. I didn't say thank you. Well, there's that part. And now going on to number 13.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Grill.
One of the things we've been continually talking about is our budget challenges, and we've had the structural deficit committee that commenced earlier this year prior to the COVID-19 challenges that we have had and will continue to deal with probably for the rest of the year and at least 2021. We had discussed possibly providing an early retirement program for employees and focusing on positions that may be combined with another position that may be changed to a different type of a position, whereas one might have been previously at a higher level, say 70,000, and we could change and adjust the responsibilities where their salary might be at 50 or 40. Or in some cases, because of the nature of some other things that we've been doing to adjust our service delivery, we're able to not fill those positions or eliminate them. So I put together just a framework for what we could possibly look at, and I just wanted to get some insight from the council members and the Administration and Finance Committee committee members to see what, if there was interest in moving forward with something like this, obviously based on costing. I shared my screen where it has the resolution, and it really just talks about possibly providing a voluntary early retirement program and looking at the people who I explained previously. One of the biggest challenges that people find during retirement is the cost of health insurance. So this program is structured to work to have people pay the same that they would as active employees for a certain period of time, and then perhaps their percentage would go up depending upon what type of coverage they're having. So this would be for non-represented, non-sworn employees. We would be giving people opportunity in this year, some as soon as the council would adopt this, some throughout the rest of the year, and then also some in 2021. So if there's, and it would be prorated for part-time employees. So it's it's structured to where single employees get a certain amount and they would get a payout immediately of a certain amount, and then sometime in the future, another amount. I apologize for not having the numbers in here. I did have something in there, but I want to have some more eyes on that, and I don't want to create expectations that we aren't able to live up to. So this is just very general framework, but it really focuses on giving someone a minimal payout for leaving at the time that we ask them, and providing benefits to them since we're self-insured. To adjust what they would be paying from retiree rates to active rates. So the main thing I'm looking for is, if you're interested in something like this, based on the cost, of course, and then if you would like to just make this a voluntary program and not contingent upon retirement, where it's a reduction in force program.
Mr. Chair, Lysick.
Go ahead, Alderman Lysick.
I like the concept. I think, as everyone knows, our biggest expense is employees. And the way we can cut the budget is to reduce the staff. And this is one way to reduce staff without laying people off. It's a way to reduce salaries and a way to take a look at and maybe eliminate positions along the way and consolidate positions. Obviously, it's all contingent upon what numbers are plugged in here and how much this is going to cost and what the benefit is. But I certainly think it's worth looking at, and would encourage us to proceed.
And any further discussion on this?
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Weigel.
I would concur with Alderman Lysick on this. Obviously, we have to find that fine point where we make it attractive for the employees to buy into it, but it's also got to be attractive enough for us to save the money and the long-term costs. So, yeah, so I'd like to see those X's filled in, but I'd certainly like to commend staff on working on this. And of course, the sooner it gets enacted, the sooner people could opt into it, and the sooner we could save money. So, yes, I'd say keep working on it.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty strong consensus in favor of proceeding with this. Is there any further discussion? And Ms. Grill, your thoughts, should we place this on file? Should we just hold it? Do we need to take any formal action at this point?
I think if you would just hold it, we can just amend it if we wanted to. Did you want to include it as a voluntary reduction in force program?
Yeah,
Or
thank you.
just-
That was your second question, and you're doing well at keeping us on task. I think the answer is yes. I'd like to hear what other folks say.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Lysick.
This is just a discussion item. There's nothing before us other than discussion this evening. It's not even a communication to be placed on file. So, we're discussing it, and I think we gave Rebecca some direction on this, and we proceed. And at such time as the staff develops a program, then that can be presented in the form of a resolution or ordinance or communication or whatever appropriate action we need to take.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Vitale.
Yeah, I do agree with the fact of, in the past, many private industry, they've done that to offer, office workers or even the shop workers, if their wish is to pick up early retirement. To me, that's a good proposal, and based on what we hear, to me, that's something to really to digest and kind of look into it, for us to digest and make a decision. And I do appreciate that, Rebecca. Thank you.
And Rebecca, did we answer your question about it being a voluntary reduction in force program versus an alternative?
Not exactly, but I'll assume that I'll put that in there, and you can always change it if you want.
Very good, very good. Right, then moving on to item 14, a finance director comptroller report. Can I have a motion to place on file?
So move.
Second, Tenorio.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item 15, a claim by Whitnall Summit regarding excessive assessments.
Chair,
Attorney Decker.
this is an item that the council considered at its last meeting, and I got direction from the council. The parties have agreed to that amount, but the council just didn't have a formal motion in open session. So I'd ask the council to approve the claim in a manner that sets the assessed value at $57,892,000.
Thank you, Cale. And just to
So
refresh
moved.
our memory, yeah, Alderman Lysick made a motion, and can I have a second?
Second,
A
Weigel.
second, thank you, Alderman Weigel. Just to refresh our memory, the settlement amount was 57 million. Where did we start at?
I believe we were in the 70s. Jason may be able to, I think he's on mute right now, but
We started at a little over 70 million.
and
Whitnall Summit,
the
I imagine, was somewhere in the $2 million area.
I think they started somewhere in the 40s, I believe. Maybe even the 30s. I don't know, Jason. I can't remember the initial offer.
They were assessed at 43 with the two properties together.
That's right.
So,
Ultimately, because this was part of a commercial revaluation, it was a pretty extensive review of their records that we went through, and ultimately decided that this was something supportable by the evidence that they presented to us.
Okay, thank you. And that makes sense. It seems like a good settlement. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. And then item 16 is a closed session item. So for agenda item 16, the committee
Sure.
may convene. Go ahead, is somebody?
Sure. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I was going to first just give the council a brief summary of it to see if there is an interest in going in closed session.
Yeah, please, Cale, go ahead.
So this is a claim that was filed by an individual. It's a claim for injury or excessive force, and he has made a settlement offer to our office. So I'm just ethically obliged to bring that to the council when it's a specific offer like this. The offer exceeds the limitation under state law at this point. And so if the council wants to hear more about this case, I'm happy to do so in closed session. But if the council doesn't want to entertain an offer to settle, then they could do that in open session as well without any further discussion. It's really up to the council, to the committee, how they want to proceed.
Yeah, we are trying to go quicker with our back-to-back meetings, but still, I'd like to try and go through this quickly if nobody has an objection to that.
I would too.
Okay, for agenda item 16, the committee may convene in closed session pursuant to the provisions of Wisconsin statute section 19.851G for the purpose of conferring with the city attorney who will render an oral written advice concerning strategy to be adopted with respect to litigation in which the city is or is likely to become involved. The committee may reconvene in open session after the completion of the closed session to consider the balance of the agenda. That is, can I have a motion to go into closed session?
Move we go into closed session, Weigel.
Second, Lysick.
Okay, and Alderperson Keen,
Here.
you want to say aye?
Aye.
Alderman Lysick,
Aye.
Alderman Tenorio,
Aye.
and Alderman Weigel,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay, we're in closed session, and we'll wait to go off of YouTube.